I wanted to stay, not leave. I was afraid of closing my eyes too, because I thought I would never open them again. Eventually, my eyes closed anyways, and then I had my second near-death experience, which was not so nice though. It was simply black. It was black, and everything tugged at me. It felt as if I was being pulled through my window, even though I wanted to stay inside myself.
Ms. Fütterer, you've had two near-death experiences that form part of a very unusual medical record. Would you please tell us what you've experienced in the past few years?
Let's start at the point where my life was relatively normal. Until I was 14 years old, I was always sporty and very active. I was able to eat normally too. All of a sudden, I got many food intolerances, lots of diarrhea, and became very desperate. Additionally, I got massive bone problems as well at the age of 14. Before that, I was a performance dancer, but overnight I wasn't able to walk, had strong fever attacks and bone cramps. Moreover, I had this problem that my right leg became very stiff. This had probably to do with my joints and fatigue fractures, which was waved aside as growth spurts and so forth. It kind of dissolved over time, so I was able to move again. Instead of dancing, I began to sing, since I wanted to compensate that. It was not until I was 18 years old when it got worse again. My face became very swollen. I received lots of cortisone during those stages, even back then when the food intolerances had begun. Lymphatic fluid leaked as well, and once again nobody knew where that came from. And the diarrhea became even stronger. At one point it was suspected that I was anorexic, since I had lost so much weight, and that the diarrhea came from laxatives, which I never used though. At the age of 22, I could no longer walk from one day to the next. The massive bone pain returned, and I noticed that my sternum began to shift. I went to doctors and osteologists and have been told things like, "Well, don't you act like that if something is shifting. You have a pretty face still." A very encouraging statement, which led to even more despair. That was when the doctor hopping started. One has to find the source somehow. I even noticed how my back began to deform and how I became shorter. I was around 5'6" in the beginning, but in 2010 I was only 4'2" and only able to walk with a rollator. I really had immense bone pain in my whole body, from toes to fingers. It was truly unpleasant. It became worse and worse until the point where my lung capacity decreased and my organs shifted as well. My head stayed right on my shoulders, and that didn't allow me to swallow properly. It came back every time, which made me unable to drink too. That arose the question, how can we manage to straighten the spine again so the other organs can return to their places? Then came a very tricky spinal fusion. It was performed by a doctor who had 10 opponents because, unlike him, his team didn't believe the surgery would turn out successful. That occurred in 2011. Prior to that, I was in an extension rack called Halo Vest, where the head is surrounded by 8 pins and one is being stretched out. Hopes were high to at least be able to lay someone properly on the operating table, which is a requirement, obviously. In 2011, on August the 31st, the first surgery had been performed. The second one happened 1 week later due to a storage error and 2 other spinal fractures. In the meantime, we are glad about it because walking was impossible after the first one, but after the second one, it was doable. I was finally able to think, and my feet obeyed to me. But the promises I was given that I would walk out of the hospital didn't come true. I was too weak and the pain remained, so I had to leave the hospital in a wheelchair. I walked through the exit at least, while being supported by my mother and my father next to me, in order to generate the feeling that it was still worth it somehow. I was quite sad afterwards because I thought, well, now I am straight, but I'm not able to walk properly because I'm having difficulties with the coordination. Then many rehabs followed, as well as 1 year of intensive training. I was a nursing case after all. My mother had to turn me around. I needed to be washed. I wasn't able to cook food on my own. And all in all, it was very sad and cruel.
How did you feel within, besides the physical symptoms? You must have been in mortal fear, weren't you?
It was mortal agony, since the doctors always mentioned, Mrs. Fütterer, you only have 3 months left to live, since you don't have phosphate in your body and your cells will stop at one point. I had 2 port implantations in order to substitute that. The one decomposed and needed to be removed. And the other one had a MRSA germ, which scared me a lot since I knew that without this vital substance I can only live 3 months. I want to mention though that prior to the last year, where I felt very bad again, I never registered that. I had no fears. I always stayed in my own world, and since my body was so low, the mind wasn't able to sense these emotions. Maybe in order to protect the body. During the hospital stage, where others had been desperate, we laughed, even before the surgery. I think I wasn't aware of what had been actually going on there. I always said, if I die, I die. Whether I die on the operating table or whether I choke. But at least I won't be able to say that I didn't try. It was basically turned off. Surviving. It was all about surviving. No emotions involved. Now, I do feel those emotions from back then, and I don't even know what to do with them since they don't fit in my current reality. Therefore, I currently have to deal with massive panic attacks. Panicking about the day, panicking about collapsing and not being able to leave the house, panicking about being overwhelmed with everything. This is the first time that I actually live and not only try to survive. One has to learn how to live. And that is extremely difficult at the age of 31. I lost the ability to live in the past 8 years. All that mattered was the disease, the moment. Sometimes I think that I lived in a better way back then, because it was actually how one is supposed to live. One should enjoy every moment and be in the present, and not live in the past or the future. I currently do live in the past or the future rather than in the now, I believe.
What was the medical breakthrough that shifted your life from surviving to actually living?
That was a personal breakthrough. The medicine had failed. Last year, in the beginning of January, I had a femoral neck fracture because I had been attacked by 2 dogs while riding a bike. From then on, the downward spiral began. I wasn't able to get surgery on this fracture since the bones wouldn't have been able to deal with those instrumentations. Therefore, I tried to solve that conventionally with everyday training, despite all the pain. That was in a rehab on a treadmill and a special suspension in order to stimulate the growth of the bones through the bump frequency. At one point, I realized that I could no longer do that. My body couldn't do it anymore. I told my parents that I wanted to die somehow, and I thought the easiest way would be to stop eating food. So I stopped eating and drank very little. That was in May, and I planned to fall asleep on my 30th birthday. I think I was out of my mind at this point as well. The beautiful side of it was that one gets into a very high state, kind of like a meditative state, once one stops consuming food. All I did was floating, and I had no pain either. I even felt as if I already had angels around me. I had so many encounters too, and noticed that's where I want to go. I had no fear of dying either. I was somehow not aware that I am going to die. It was a really strange state of mind. I rode my exercise bike a lot in order to come down further and further. I even said goodbye to all of my friends. And after letting go of everyone, I really noticed what it means to live. I had always been shaped by structure, which was the only thing that kept me alive. Since the body was so down, the only thing that helps are certain automatisms where one doesn't have to think what one needs to do. But I noticed that once I let go of the automatisms, I begin to feel myself again, and I considered that as a reason to stay on Earth. But the body was already so far away. On Monday, the 11th of July, I went to the health store with all the energy I had left and bought high-calorie foods because I wanted to turn around. I somehow wanted to stay alive. I didn't want to go anymore. And I knew that I somehow had to provide energy for my body. Otherwise, that wouldn't work. On the 12th of July in 2016, I began to eat in the morning and thought, "Oh God, I can't even hold myself up at the table. My head is sinking into the plate." My mother was there and the doorbell rang. My friend came over who was actually not supposed to come. My mother brought me to this chair over there and my friend helped me. I noticed that she needed to hold me, otherwise I would have gone. So she held me with all of her power. At one point though, I saw myself laying down there. I saw how my friend held me and how my mother sat by my body and cried. I also saw my grandmother who was tapping on her forehead and asked me what I was actually doing here and that I needed to go down again, not up.
Your late grandmother?
Yes. In that second, I was inside myself again and opened my eyes. I looked at my mother and my friend and said voicefully, "I want to live."
That was your first near-death
That was
experience?
my first near-death experience. And that's when my fight for survival started. Now, it was not about the fight to leave. It was the fight to stay. My doctor said to me, "Mrs. Fütterer, we cannot do anything for you. You will experience this state a second time and you won't come back next time."
That means your mother agreed with your decision to stop the consumption of food and water and, as a result, you changed your mind and wanted to live again?
Yes. Honestly speaking, I think it was simply fear when I look back. Fear of what might have happened if everyone was down there. I didn't know where I would go. Even though the state was beautiful the first time, I was not in pain. I actually felt like flying. It was kind of weird though, because I was there and not there at the same time. I wasn't able to communicate with anyone. Well, at least with my grandmother, but not with my loved ones. My mother became so important to me due to the disease that I think our bond was something that held me here on Earth, in my body, within that moment. I woke up and heard from the doctor that I will be gone shortly and that he cannot do anything for me. He wouldn't even hospitalize me, which I found very terrible since I needed some kind of help in my opinion, infusions or something like that. We stayed here at home for 2 days, and then on the 14th in the evening, I laid on the chair again with my mother holding my hands, and I suddenly felt how it was returning again. Something is pulling on me, and I'm going to leave. I panicked, and it indeed happened again.
You were scared because you wanted to stay?
Yes, I wanted to stay, not leave. I was afraid of closing my eyes too, because I thought I would never open them again. Eventually, my eyes closed anyways, and then I had my second near-death experience, which was not so nice though. It was simply black. It was black, and everything tugged at me. It felt as if I was being pulled through my window, even though I wanted to stay inside myself. I talked about this with my therapist afterwards, and he said that I probably woke up in the so-called tunnel, but not before the tunnel, where one encounters the beautiful bright side which I had seen in my first near-death experience, where I thought, when I walk through it, everything will be fine. This time, he said, I woke up at a place where one usually does not wake up. One is in there and wakes up once one is not waking up consciously anymore, but is simply dead. But my will to live was so big that I wanted to return no matter what. Therefore, I woke up here as well and went to the hospital with my mother at night. We took a taxi. They dragged me there, and I said, "They know me. I want to live. Please help me. Please do something." But they as well said that I won't make it. I was brought to the palliative care unit, and I thought, is anybody actually listening to me? I don't want to leave. I want to stay. Luckily, there was a palliative doctor, a very old woman, who said to me, "Mrs. Fütterer, you can't stay here. You don't want to leave. You actually want to stay on Earth. This is not the place for you to stay." Unfortunately, no hospital would take me, since none of them knew what to do with me. I returned home for 1 week and was almost gone again, twice, because I was simply too weak. Then I started to write like crazy. Every night I wrote everything down. My fears, my assumptions regarding how certain things happened, how the OCDs happened, and so on. At one point, my parents thought that they needed to institutionalize me, because they thought I was mad. I tried to communicate and explain myself, but I wasn't able to speak. I was too weak to talk. All I could do was writing, and they thought I had gone crazy. That was the most terrible thing for me. To know that the family thinks one is insane, whereas I noticed everything what was going on. I was simply too weak to express myself. I wrote letters and wildly gesticulated, which appeared very crazy to them. I always wrote on the toilet, because that was the only place where I had peace. Therefore, they really thought I had gone mad, manic. My aunt is a psychologist and said, "Yes, we have to go there." And then very crazy things happened. I had immense fear, but once we were in the car on the way to the psychiatry, I knew something was accompanying me, God, or a power, or whatever it was, but I was really relaxed. I even fell asleep in the waiting room for the first time after this whole time. I was just as relaxed during the talk with the psychiatrist. She said to my mother, "Your daughter is not out of her mind. She simply needs to go to the emergency department, to the observation ward, and needs to be put together, and everything would be fine again." Therefore, I luckily got to the emergency room in a municipal hospital, where I got checked and was put to the observation ward, where I spent the next 6 weeks and could regenerate in the clinic.
How can one imagine that physically? How much did you weigh?
I weighed 42 pounds, all skin and bones. Body functions like seeing, hearing, swallowing, and so forth all stopped. I couldn't even use the bathroom. I was almost dead, one can say. They needed to get the stool from me. I couldn't hear anything, couldn't see anything. I had no saliva, nothing.
Putting you together worked?
They didn't know what to do with me. I was laying there and had been given 2 infusions that did nothing for me. Therefore, I got a blood transfusion. Then I got this idea with almond butter. Almond butter is calorie-rich and has proteins, 2,600 calories, and I added honey too. So I ate 2 glasses every day, no matter how bad I felt. And after 4.5 weeks, I left the clinic. 2 weeks later, I drove to the Lake Constance. The physicians don't know how it works. They say everything is a miracle. Something else helped me though. A friend was in Peru, in Brazil, with a pastor and told him this story. He gave her holy water, and I kept drinking it 3 times a day, at 6 a.m., 12 p.m., and 6 p.m. I was connected to the monitors, and whenever I took 3 sips from the water, they really spiked. So the nurses said to me, "We don't know what you're drinking, but keep drinking it, because it helps." In this time period, I also noticed that once one moves away from this stoical rhythm, then one has a connection to something else, to love, to care, to some hand that helped me, because I know I wouldn't have made it without that. There were so many hints about what I needed to do, and I simply believed very strongly. It's kind of sad that one loses faith again, but in this moment it was there. It was already once there, when I felt so bad after the stiffening. Well, now I hold lots of fear, because the faith vanished again.
Faith in a sense of being guided and being taken care of, not a dogmatic faith.
No, not at all. I'm usually very faithless. Neither do I believe in church nor in a graveyard. I do believe, though, that faith is always inside the heart, no institution required. In my opinion, the body is not what the human being is. Neither is it a covering. I don't believe in coverings. I always believe in fullness. I indeed know that I received fullness through the near-death experience. In the past, I was rather a covering, a slave to myself. But that changed due to the near-death and the realization of one's own healing abilities. I mean, 1 year ago, I couldn't even hold a bottle of water, and now I am climbing walls. I look normal now. I received 78 pills prior to these experiences. Nowadays, I only take 11 on a daily basis. I stopped taking them myself. I also believe that doctors can create a lot of damage within their own helplessness and kind of shut the body down. I had no connection between my body and soul. Not at all. I hated my body, but I couldn't understand my mind, and my body couldn't understand my mind. Today I feel the connection more often. It is a long path and lots of work is involved that I have to do on myself. There are so many moments where I get angry that I didn't do it. Regarding the current despair, I would rather be dead as well, but I'm so afraid of it that I would actually rather stay here. There is a very strong inner fragmentation ever since that. For the first 4 months, I only felt euphoria and gratitude for that I am here. But now it is time to process everything. Not only what happened in a year, but what happened since the age of 14. Because ever since then, I had no emotions, which I do now. I always say, now I am a human being made out of flesh and blood, but back then I was a machine. I only functioned in order to survive. That is something I mentioned earlier. I really have to learn how to live first and how to hold emotions. I also noticed that my mind almost starved as well last year, and that many stimuli really overwhelm me. Then I always feel as if I would float above me again. In fact, I am not completely inside my body ever since the near-death experience. That's really how it is. I always feel like the soul is in between, and I have to bring it back to me all the time. There are also moments where I feel like a stranger to myself, where I do things I thought would never be possible. So I came to the conclusion that it's the easiest way if I don't have the possibility to think, but only live in the now. When I have many tasks, but don't start to try to feel myself, because that's when it gets complicated. Then the fear arises that I am half dead again, because I feel like floating again. And the feeling of floating is associated with the near-death experience and being dead. Oftentimes when I feel bad, I feel like, now he's coming at me, now I have to go. I cheated death after all. Last week I heard a sentence in a movie that helped me quite much. It goes like this: if one falls asleep forever, then one finds oneself at a place where dreams are birthed. Ever since I heard it, my dreams became very beautiful and intense. And whenever I focus on that thought and confront it with the fearful thought, then I sometimes even desire to visit that place. I am not as fearful anymore, which helps a lot. I also learned that it's our thoughts that wear us out, not the facts. It's just a situation that one interprets with feelings which are coupled to another situation, which is not the reality. But becoming aware of that takes time. I am convinced that at one point I will have that as an automatism again, and will not be afraid as soon as I float again. Maybe I will even be able to enjoy this state of floating and say, it's actually great to be able to witness oneself from an objective point of view. From this perspective, one might be able to make much quicker changes than, in comparison, from acting from a subjective viewpoint only. But that makes it difficult to deal with temporal things. In the past, for instance, there were things that I really wanted to have. Nowadays, I couldn't care less. There were things I wanted to achieve. But today I think, well, you will leave at one point, so it doesn't matter. One knows that there is a second stage afterwards. It's kind of an escape too, not having to deal with temporal things. There is extreme desire to simply move somewhere in the mountains and not have anything around me. Not as much of these worldly goods either. They don't make one happy. One doesn't need them. I experienced that if one has nothing but his own life, then one is the happiest. Then one wishes a room, a candle, a pen and a paper in order to write with oneself and one's thoughts.
You are someone who is able to reflect their own experiences quite well. To sum up, what are your most important insights from all those experiences?
The most important insights. I can describe them from a blind man's point of view. Most people nowadays assume that the cover is what we are on the inside, or is the reflection of what's inside. And that may be true to some degree, but a blind person doesn't see the cover. He still recognizes who you are. Therefore, it's not the cover, but rather what speaks from inside the cover. Due to my fate, I was allowed to recognize that beauty doesn't shine outside, but rather shines from the inside. No matter how sick one is, it doesn't matter if someone says one is ugly, there are no ugly people. Every human being holds so much warmth and love, and once that is allowed to be expressed, then every cover shines. The common thought about the outer destroys a lot nowadays. That was something I was allowed to experience through the near-death and everything else. I noticed that one actually becomes more and more beautiful as life goes on, with all the wisdom and one's own experience. I think that is my image of humanity. Look behind the cover. Close your eyes even if you are meeting someone. Listen to your heart and let your heart speak.
The inner world of a human is multi-layered. There are thoughts, feelings, perceptions, drives, and so on. How does the inner world of the soul appear to you?
It's kind of like a pyramid is being built. There are many components, and if these components don't fit each other, everything collapses. If one isn't aware of the parts that exist within one, then no communication is possible. And if communication can't take place, then certain parts develop in so-called inner managers who animate one. Then it might happen that one has built its own prison. If one forgets to think about the fact that correspondence between the mind, the spirit, the heart, the intuition, and the body has to take place, then one becomes sick. The worst part, in my opinion, is that every disease takes place in the mind, but so does every healing. Once the mind understands what is happening to the body, it can send the right signals in order to undertake these repairs. If one is not aware of that, though, and the connection caps, one goes under. Most of the time, not even due to the physical illness, but because of the mind, because of the power of thought that lets you think what reality is. One can talk oneself into the belief of being too fat, too dumb, of being unable to perform a job, that it's always the others who are guilty. But if one asks certain questions like, is this true? How would my life look like without this thought? How would I feel? How would the other feel? Wouldn't I be much freer? I think once we start to reflect and to turn these thoughts around and say, it's not the other one who thinks I'm stupid. I feel like I'm stupid. What can I do about it? Then I am not appearing like that to the others, and they don't have the possibility to think about it. I think these 4 questions are quite important. Whether it's true, whether it's actually true, how one would be without it, and how one thinks life would look like without this thought. If one implements this automatism, one can experience the actual reality, and not the power of thought that can destroy oneself.
The perception.
Yes, the perception. There is one very banal example, which I would like to mention. One woman went to the restroom and the whole toilet seat was wet. She has seen how the woman left the restroom and thought, while being on the toilet herself, what she would say to her, what a dirty woman she was. She flushed the toilet and noticed that it was the flushing that made the seat wet. Puff. It was nothing but an illusion. It's just a perception and what we interpret into it. And if we let these thoughts flow and look at them and say, okay, you can move on, then it is fine. But how do we think we can presume how someone else sees us and then maybe even telling them how they should see us? That is not our task. That is something the other one has to deal with. Just as I wanted to influence death and influence life, but that is something God has to deal with, or fate. It is not in my power. And once we are aware of that, fear of death is not relevant any longer. Because I can't influence it anyways, why should I deal with that? There are three affairs: the one regarding fate, the one regarding others, and the one regarding me. If I only deal with my own, then I am able to distance myself from two big disturbing factors.
To attempt to gain distance, is that your strategy for dealing with fear? How do you deal with fear?
I write them letters. I am not afraid of uncertainty. In fact, it has a name, and it is called Mrs. Fear. Then I deal with her and begin to correspond with her. Once I communicate with her, I receive answers as well. If I swallow it down, the thoughts return that are tricking me into a false reality, and one becomes paralyzed by fear. But if I let it come up to the surface and talk to it, then I may recognize why it is there in the first place.
Many people who've had near-death experiences say that it has deeply changed them. What did it do to you? Would you also say that your life has completely changed ever since?
In the beginning, it was like everyone says. I have changed everything. I ate everything, even though I was intolerant due to my allergies, and I thought everything disappeared. I am a new me. Now I notice that I have to live with this combination. Certain requirements are simply there due to the disease. It's not possible to eat schnitzel with fries because my stomach can't resorb it. But I am trying to free myself from thoughts and to not fall back into these stoic, destroying rhythms, to reflect more, to question things. But I wouldn't say that I am a new person in the long run. I thought so afterwards. I really did. I thought, wow, that was a rebirth. I am someone else. There are my current thoughts. But I think one has to imagine it like that. Certain parts within you were indeed reborn, the ones who had been suppressed prior to that. But the old parts are not all bad ones. Many of those are needed. One has to find a good combination. There is a part who dictates, and it is sometimes needed to pull certain things through. But one has to make sure that the soul and balance is still shining, because that is what enables us to feel, to be human and not a machine. I think by experiencing near death, I learned to look within me much more and to reflect more often, just like you've said, to question, to observe, to draw lines, to relive things and to decide whether it was right or not is good. I think that is my motto, to accept all the parts within me and listen to them.
I would like to sum up with a typical question. What are your views on life after death? That is something that scares many people. After all your experiences, how do you feel about it?
Unlike many others, I am still very much afraid of it. I am scared to create a wonderful life in this moment and to lose it again. But within the last days and weeks, I looked at it closely and realized that the power of thought can actually create beautiful thoughts and images too. It can also take away my fear of death. In my case, it was the imagination that I've mentioned, that I will go to the place where dreams are birthed. Then I can help to spread dreams and will notice that everything I have ever imagined can be even more beautiful, because I think that is what is being called transcendental. Complete devotion without these grueling things that are usually around us. That was that which I had felt the first time. One is free. One doesn't think. One is. If one is, then one experiences what is being called meditative state in Buddhism, a state of unbelievable happiness. And I was able to experience that during the time where I didn't eat. If you are one with everything, with yourself, with the energy around you, then one is able to transform to different dimensions. I believe I won't return to the same earth. That would mean I didn't achieve anything, and I would have the state that I would like to have. I am convinced that we have time here to learn, to experience, and to gain awareness regarding our bodies and our mind in order to transform it into the state of happiness without any question.
Ms. Futter, thank you for sharing your experiences with us. Thank you very much for this conversation. Many valuable things have been said.